The sea is calm tonight, a mirror of silver under the breath of the moon. Waves roll gently, carrying whispers older than time itself. Listen closely, and you may hear the voice of the deep, soft, and eternal. This is the realm of Poseidon, god of the sea, master of tides and keeper of mysteries. He rules not with fire or fury, but with the endless rhythm of water. Yet tonight, something feels missing in the song of the ocean. The waves do not speak as they once did. Their song is thinner, their pulse weaker, their stories fading into silence. What happens when the ocean forgets its own music? What happens when the waves that once carried memory vanish into quiet? This is not a tale of battles or storms. It is a tale of memory, of whispers long lost, and of the search to bring them home. The sea has secrets hidden beneath its calm surface. And tonight, we will follow Poseidon as he listens to the silence. We will walk the shore beside him, step by step, and we will hear the story of the forgotten waves. The shore was quiet, touched only by the gentle rhythm of twilight waves. Poseidon walked slowly, his feet sinking into wet sand. Each step echoed with the weight of ages, though no mortal heard. The air smelled of salt, of driftwood, of secrets carried by the tide. He paused often, listening to the sea as one listens to a friend. But the voice of the water was thin, broken, almost shy. He knew the ocean well, every tide and every current. Yet tonight, something inside its music had slipped away. The horizon stretched endlessly, painted gold by the fading sun. Seagulls circled above, calling sharp notes into the still air. Their cries felt louder than the waves themselves. Poseidon frowned, for the sea should never fall silent. He bent to pick up a handful of sand, letting it stream through his hand. Grains slipped away like moments, like memories forgotten. "Where are you?" he whispered to the tide. But the tide did not answer as it once did. Long ago, waves had spoken in laughter and in song. They had carried tales from one coast to another. They had been alive as any creature. Now they seemed weary, pale, without memory. The god of the sea felt something strange stir inside him. It was not anger, not storm, but an ache, a longing. He closed his eyes and remembered the early days. Back when the world was young and every wave had a name. Back when sailors leaned on their rhythm for guidance. Back when children slept to their lullabies at night. The waves had been more than water then. They had been keepers of memory, guardians of stories untold. Poseidon opened his eyes and looked across the endless ocean. The waves rolled in, but they were shallow in spirit, like echoes with no source, like songs with no heart. He felt the silence more deeply than any storm. The sea had always been his voice, his breath, his soul. But now part of that soul was vanishing, fading into shadows. He walked further along the curve of the shore. The sand cooled beneath the touch of evening. He listened again, hoping for the sound he missed. Only the faint lap of water answered, soft but empty. He turned his gaze toward the horizon once more. Clouds gathered faintly, not dark, only distant. They looked like messengers waiting to speak. Yet no message came, only silence. Poseidon sighed, the sound heavier than thunder. The ocean was his domain, yet it hid its truth. It was not defiance, but something else, something sad. He stopped near a pool where moonlight touched the water. Ripples moved gently, but their rhythm lacked memory. He crouched low and touched the surface. The reflection of his face wavered like a broken song. He whispered again, not as a god, but as a friend. "Tell me where you have gone." The pool trembled, but no answer came. Instead, the silence deepened, surrounding him like mist. It was then he felt the first whisper of mystery, a space where the forgotten might live, unseen and unheard. The waves had not died, he realized. They had only drifted somewhere beyond reach. And he, Poseidon, must find them. The shore held no answers, only questions. But questions were enough to begin a journey. He rose to his full height, gazing out at the sea. The god of the ocean stood alone, yet not defeated. For in the silence, he felt a promise. The promise that the forgotten could be remembered again. The tide rose, brushing against his feet. Its cool touch felt like a quiet call, soft but real. Poseidon nodded, as though the ocean had spoken. And so began the search for the forgotten waves. The night deepened as Poseidon lingered by the shore, listening to the hush of waves. The silence was steady, yet something waited beneath it, fragile and hidden. He looked down and noticed an object glimmering among the seaweed. It was a shell, smooth and pale, shaped like a spiral of memory. He bent to lift it, brushing sand from its curved surface. The moment he held it, the air shifted, as though the ocean breathed. The shell was warm, alive with a faint pulse that matched the tide. He raised it to his ear, expecting the hollow roar of the sea. Instead, he heard a whisper, faint and trembling. It called his name, stretching across centuries of silence. "Poseidon!" The voice sighed, like a memory longing to return. He stilled, for gods rarely hear their own names carried so gently. This was no mortal voice, nor any creature of the deep. It was the echo of something once vibrant, now lost. He closed his eyes and listened again. The shell spoke in fragments, like waves broken on rocks. It told of songs once sung by the sea itself, songs that carried comfort to sailors crossing endless waters, songs that lifted children into sleep with gentle rhythm, songs that promised the ocean was more than storm and salt. Now those songs were fading, forgotten by the tides. The voice grew faint, as though slipping further away. Poseidon tightened his grip, unwilling to let it vanish. "Where are you?" he asked the shell softly. The whisper answered not with words, but with sorrow. He felt it, the ache of stories buried and abandoned. The waves had carried those stories once, but not anymore. The conch was a fragment of memory, a key to something hidden. Poseidon lowered it and looked out across the dark water. The sea rippled, restless, as if ashamed of its silence. He lifted the shell once more and held it close. The whisper shifted, pointing not with sound, but with feeling. It directed him toward the horizon, toward distant islands unseen. Somewhere beyond, the forgotten waves still lingered. He felt certainty bloom, gentle but unshakable. The sea had not abandoned him, only misplaced its voice. The shell was its messenger, fragile but enduring. Poseidon tucked it carefully into his hand. He could feel its heartbeat thrum like the ocean's lost rhythm. The night sky stretched above, heavy with stars. They shimmered as if watching, guiding his next step. He turned away from the shore and faced the water. The waves rolled in again, not strong, but promising. The silence was no longer empty. It was waiting, waiting for him to remember. He understood now. This was no storm to fight. This was a memory to recover, a song to restore. He placed the shell against his chest and listened. The whisper returned, softer but more sure. It told him he was not alone in this journey. The sea longed for its forgotten voice as much as he did. Poseidon stepped into the water, cool against his feet. Each wave curled around him, urging him forward. The shell glowed faintly, lit from within by memory. It was a beacon, a companion, a guide. He looked once more toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, the forgotten waves were waiting. And he, the god of the sea, would bring them home. With the conch in his hand, he moved deeper into the tide. The silence followed, but so did the promise of song. For even in stillness, the ocean was never truly voiceless. It only waited for someone to listen long enough. And Poseidon was ready to listen. Poseidon walked along the shoreline, the shell still warm in his hand. The whisper lingered in his mind, faint yet unyielding. It carried not words, but the weight of memory. He closed his eyes and let the sound of the tide return. And then he remembered the ancient days, when the sea was young. The ocean had been alive with voices, each wave a singer. They rose together in chorus, weaving stories through salt and foam. Sailors once trusted those waves to guide their journeys. Each tide was more than water. It was a compass of sound. It carried tales from one coast to another, across vast horizons. The sea did not only move ships, it moved hearts. Poseidon recalled children falling asleep to the lull of waves. The ocean's song cradled them, promising peace through the night. Fishermen listened too, hearing courage in its steady rhythm. Every crest and fall carried wisdom, hope, and memory. But now, that voice was fading, slipping into silence. The memory of tides was breaking, piece by piece. Poseidon sighed, his chest heavy with the loss. He had ruled storms, commanded tempests, and calmed seas. But even he could not summon the vanished songs. The waves had chosen silence, drifting into forgetfulness. He opened his eyes, staring into the restless horizon. The stars shimmered above, but the sea felt muted. Where once music lived, now there was only absence. He raised the shell to his ear again. The whisper spoke softly, weaving fragments of the past. It told him of days when waves carried messages of love, of mothers singing to children as the tide echoed back, of sailors hearing voices that led them safely to land. Those memories still lived, but buried deep, far below. The sea longed for them, even as it forgot. Poseidon felt the ache of that truth pierce him. He was not only god of the sea's power, he was guardian of its memory, its stories, its soul. And if the waves forgot, part of him would vanish too. He clenched the shell tighter, as if to hold the past. "Your song will not be lost," he vowed aloud. The ocean stirred faintly, as though listening to him. Foam curled at his feet, shimmering under moonlight. The sea still remembered pieces of its former self. It only needed someone to awaken the rest. Poseidon straightened, his voice low but firm. He began to hum, a sound older than any storm. It was not the song of power, but of remembrance. The tide shifted, rising with gentle rhythm around him. For a moment, he thought he heard the waves reply, not in words, but in resonance, a faint harmony. It was fragile, delicate, yet it was there. The shell pulsed with light, glowing faintly in his hand. He smiled, for this was not the end of memory. This was only the beginning of its return. The sea was not empty, only waiting to be reminded. And he, Poseidon, was ready to remember for it. The waves would find their voice again. They would sing not only for gods, but for all. He turned to the horizon, where dawn was still far. The night stretched wide, but hope moved within it. The shell whispered once more, steady and calm. "Find us." It breathed, like a promise. Poseidon nodded, his heart set on the journey. For the memory of tides was not gone forever. It only slept, waiting for the call to awaken. And Poseidon, god of the sea, would be its voice. The night stretched wide as Poseidon stepped deeper into the water, the shell glowing faintly in his hand. The sea stirred around him, carrying whispers too soft to form words. Then, a ripple broke the silence, playful yet deliberate. Out of the dark waters, dolphins appeared, their sleek forms gliding close. They circled Poseidon, their eyes bright with knowing. These were no ordinary creatures, but messengers of the sea. One leapt gracefully, sending droplets glittering in the moonlight. Their voices rose in a chorus of clicks and whistles. Poseidon listened, for he knew the dolphins spoke in rhythm. Though their language was not mortal, it carried truth. He lowered the shell, letting the dolphins draw nearer. Their sound was filled with concern, laced with sorrow. They told him of the waves that had drifted into silence, not destroyed, not broken, but sealed away by neglect. The dolphins remembered their laughter once carried across oceans. They remembered waves that taught sailors the map of the sea. They remembered songs that kept balance between tide and spirit. But those memories had grown faint, fading with each forgotten story. The dolphins pressed closer, urging him to listen deeper. They sang of the danger of losing the ocean's voice, not a danger of storms, but of emptiness and stillness. For without memory, even the sea could lose its heart. Poseidon felt the weight of their words press upon him. He had seen storms, but this silence was heavier. The dolphins swam in unison, forming circles of light. It was their way of showing what once was whole. They reminded him that harmony was fragile, needing care. The sea's power lay not only in waves, but in memory. Why did the waves vanish? Poseidon asked softly. The dolphins answered with a long, mournful note. They told him the waves had not been cherished enough. Sailors had stopped listening, children had stopped singing. The songs were drowned beneath noise and forgetfulness. And so the waves drifted away, unseen and unheard. Poseidon's heart ached, for this truth cut deeply. The sea had not been abandoned by malice, but by silence. The dolphins paused, watching him with steady eyes. They did not blame him, nor any mortal, only neglect. Can they return? Poseidon asked, voice low but hopeful. The dolphins spun in the water, their answer clear. Yes, the waves could return, if they were remembered. If their songs were carried again, they would awaken. The shell in his hand pulsed brighter at their words. It was proof the waves still lingered somewhere, waiting. Poseidon bowed his head, gratitude softening his gaze. The dolphins clicked once more, then leapt into the air. They arched together, silhouettes against the silver moon. It was a gesture of trust, of encouragement, of guidance. Then they swam toward the open sea, inviting him to follow. Poseidon watched as their forms glowed faintly in the water. A path opened before him, lit by their movement. The god of the sea knew what must be done. The waves were not gone forever. They only waited. He would not let them fade into eternal silence. The dolphin's song lingered, echoing inside his heart. It carried both sorrow and promise, a call to action. Poseidon stepped further into the tide, the shell close to his chest. The water rose higher, wrapping him in its cool embrace. Above him, the stars burned brighter, as if listening. And beneath him, the dolphins swam, guides of memory. Their voices echoed one last time, clear and true. Do not forget them, and they will not forget you. Poseidon nodded, his resolve now stronger than the waves. The sea would remember, and so would he. The journey to restore the forgotten waves had truly begun. Poseidon followed the dolphins into the open sea, where the water grew darker and deeper. The moon's glow stretched thin, swallowed by the vast horizon. The dolphins swam ahead, their bodies shimmering with faint light. They were guiding him toward a place long hidden, a place where memory and silence intertwined like woven threads. Poseidon held the glowing shell close, its warmth steady. It pulsed in rhythm, as though answering the beat of the waves. Each throb carried whispers, soft but incomplete. Fragments of songs drifted through, but never whole. It was as if the shell remembered what he could not. The dolphins paused, circling a patch of still water. Here the sea lay quiet, too quiet for its depth. No fish stirred, no currents passed, no waves rose. It was a hollow place, drained of motion. Poseidon stepped into it, and the silence grew heavier. Even the dolphins slowed, their voices hushed. The shell flickered, glowing brighter as if sensing something near. Poseidon spoke softly, his voice carrying through the water. "If you are here, forgotten waves, let me hear you." At first, there was nothing but the deep hush. Then, a vibration rose, trembling through the still sea. It was faint, fragile, like a memory not yet awake. Poseidon closed his eyes, focusing on the sound. The dolphins clicked gently, encouraging the rhythm to grow. The vibration formed a pattern, a pulse like a heartbeat. It was not yet a song, but it was alive. Poseidon felt its sorrow, its longing to be heard again. He lifted the shell, holding it high before the silence. The glow spread outward, spilling into the water. Shadows dissolved, and for a moment, light danced. From that light, shapes began to emerge. They were not waves of water, but waves of memory. Shimmering arcs of sound, translucent and flowing. They drifted past Poseidon, voices hidden inside their motion. He reached out, and one brushed against his hand. It was like touching an echo, warm and fleeting. The memory whispered of a time when children sang to the sea. Their voices had carried across the tide, guiding sailors home. That song had given the waves their laughter. But when the singing stopped, the waves fell silent. Poseidon's heart tightened with understanding. The forgotten waves were not gone, only waiting for song. They needed voices, human or divine, to awaken. The dolphins leapt suddenly, breaking the surface above. Their splash echoed, shaking the silence below. The arcs of memory shimmered stronger at the sound. Poseidon realized they needed more than a whisper. They needed harmony, the chorus of many voices. But where would such voices come from now? Few mortals remembered the songs of the sea. Even fewer still sang to honor it. Poseidon lowered the shell, thinking deeply. The dolphins swam close, brushing against him. Their eyes spoke of trust, urging him not to despair. The sea was vast, and memory never vanished entirely. It only waited for someone to listen. Poseidon took a breath, his resolve hardening. If mortals no longer sang, then he would begin. He raised his voice, low and deep, like the tide. It carried through the silence, steady and sure. The dolphins joined him, weaving their own notes. Together, their chorus filled the hollow sea, the arcs of memory stirred, their glow brightening. The forgotten waves trembled, awakening to the sound. The silence cracked, replaced by rhythm once more. Poseidon's voice rose higher, calling, inviting. The sea itself began to answer. The dolphins sang louder, spinning in circles of light. And in that union of voices, the first wave reappeared. It rose slowly, fragile yet determined, breaking the stillness. Poseidon smiled, for he knew the journey had truly begun. The forgotten waves had heard, and they were returning. The sea shifted as the first wave rose, fragile but alive, trembling with the weight of memory. Poseidon watched closely, his heart steady as the dolphins circled around the light. The wave shimmered, half water and half song. its voice faint but clear. It spoke of journeys across the ocean, guiding travelers through storm and night. The dolphins clicked in response, weaving their sounds into its rhythm. Slowly, the sea's silence cracked, like stone breaking under gentle pressure. Poseidon lifted the glowing shell higher, letting its light pulse outward. The glow spread through the water, stirring currents that had long slept. Soon, more shapes drifted forward, arcs of memory like ribbons of silver. They curled and swayed, carrying whispers of forgotten chants and hymns. One wave sang of fishermen, casting nets with songs on their lips. Another remembered lullabies, sung to children, rocking them with tide. The sea began to echo with these fragments, voices returning piece by piece. Poseidon felt their sorrow, but also their joy in being heard. Each wave carried a story, and each story was precious. But as they gathered, the water trembled with strain. The forgotten waves were fragile, uncertain of their place. Without voices to sustain them, they could fade again. Poseidon knew the task was greater than awakening them once. He needed to keep their songs alive, woven into the world. The dolphins leapt, scattering drops of light across the waves. Their voices blended with the growing chorus, strong and true. But Poseidon felt something deeper, something stirring beyond sight. A shadow moved at the edge of the glowing current. Not a threat, but an echo older than all others. Poseidon closed his eyes, listening with the patience of the sea. The shell in his hand pulsed harder, straining with the effort. Then a voice emerged, vast and low, like the deep abyss. It was the oldest of the waves, the first tide. Its memory stretched back to the dawn of the ocean itself. It spoke not in words, but in a rhythm older than language. Poseidon bowed his head, humbled by its presence. The dolphins slowed, forming a circle around the trembling current. The first tide carried the memory of balance and harmony. It remembered when mortals honored the sea with song and silence. It remembered when every wave was cherished as a voice. But it also remembered the drift into forgetfulness, the long quiet. It told Poseidon that memory was not enough. The waves needed renewal, a bond between sea and mortal. Only then would their song last beyond this night. Poseidon stood still, the truth sinking deeper than the tides. He could call them back, but he could not keep them alone. He needed mortal voices to join the sea again. The dolphins cried out, urging him to listen to the first tide. Its rhythm grew stronger, wrapping him in its ancient power. It showed him images. Villages by the shore, children at play, sailors at sea. It showed how their songs once fed the spirit of the waves. Poseidon's heart ached, for he knew mortals had forgotten. But he also knew memory could be restored. If even one voice sang again, the tide could grow. He touched the shell to the surface of the first tide. Light burst outward, scattering across the sea like starlight. The dolphins leapt together, their joy ringing in the water. The forgotten waves shimmered brighter, their song more certain. The silence was fading, replaced by a chorus of memory. Poseidon spoke aloud, his voice carrying strength and promise. I will not let you vanish again. I will find the voices. The sea answered with a rolling swell, gentle but firm. The first tide faded back into the current, leaving its rhythm behind. Poseidon stood alone in the glow, the dolphins at his side. He had heard the truth, and now he knew his path. The waves were awake, but they needed mortal song. The sea and land must join, or silence would return. Poseidon turned toward the horizon, the shell glowing steady in his hand. The journey was no longer only of memory. It was of unity. The dolphins swam ahead, guiding him once more, and the forgotten waves followed, their voices rising softly in the night. The horizon stretched wide as Poseidon journeyed with the dolphins, the shell glowing steady in his hand. The sea was calm, but beneath the surface current stirred with restless energy. The forgotten waves followed, faint but brighter than before, weaving around his path. They carried fragments of songs, echoes of lullabies, and hymns long lost. Poseidon listened, letting each note remind him of the world above. The dolphins clicked and whistled, weaving their voices with the fading echoes. Together, they formed a fragile harmony, yet incomplete without mortal voices. Poseidon's gaze lingered on the distant horizon, where land lay unseen. There, he knew, lay the key to awakening the waves fully. For the sea and land were bound, and their songs were shared. The dolphins leapt, scattering droplets like stars across the water's skin. It was a gesture of encouragement, urging him onward. Poseidon raised the shell, feeling its warmth spread into his chest. The first tide's rhythm still echoed faintly, a reminder of his vow. He whispered softly, "I will not let silence claim you again." The waves answered with a soft swell, like a sigh of relief. But the journey ahead was not simple, nor swift. The dolphins dove deep, beckoning Poseidon to follow below. He descended into the cool depths, light shimmering faintly around him. The sea grew darker, yet the shell's glow guided the way. Soon they reached an undersea cavern carved by ages of tide. Its walls shimmered faintly with crystals, glowing with captured memory. Each crystal pulsed with sound, echoes of voices locked within. Poseidon brushed his hand against one, and a song spilled out. It was the melody of sailors chanting as they rowed home. Another crystal sang of children playing on the shore. Another carried the hymn of women weaving nets at dawn. Each memory was precious, yet trapped, unable to reach the waves. Poseidon felt sorrow, for here lay proof of neglect. The songs had not vanished, only been hidden away. The dolphins swam slowly, circling the cavern with quiet reverence. This was the Chamber of Echoes, where the sea kept what was lost. The shell in Poseidon's hand glowed brighter as he held it forth. The crystals answered, their light sparking across the cavern. The chamber filled with sound, fragments blending into a fragile chorus. But still, it lacked wholeness, the voice of living mortals. Poseidon's heart ached, yet his resolve only deepened. He turned to the dolphins, who swam close, their eyes steady. They sang, urging him not to despair, for hope still remained. Poseidon spoke firmly, "These voices must return to the world above." The cavern trembled gently, as if agreeing with his words. The forgotten waves swirled inside, drinking from the sound of the crystals. They shimmered brighter, their voices growing stronger with each note. Poseidon raised the shell and pressed it against the cavern wall. A surge of light burst outward, connecting crystal to shell. The voices spilled freely, flowing into the sea once more. The dolphins leapt in joy, their whistles ringing in celebration. The cavern, once heavy with silence, now throbbed with song. The forgotten waves shimmered around Poseidon, no longer faint. They twined together, forming a current of glowing sound. Poseidon smiled, though his eyes were solemn with thought. This was only the beginning, for the sea alone could not hold them. Mortals must sing again, or the voices would fade once more. He turned, lifting his gaze toward the unseen horizon above. The dolphins followed, guiding him toward the path back to shore. Behind them, the Chamber of Echoes dimmed softly, its duty complete. The sea was alive with memory, yet yearning for renewal. Poseidon whispered, "The land must hear you again." and with that vow, he swam upward, the shell glowing like a star. The forgotten waves followed close, carrying the chorus of memory. The dolphins led the way, swift and sure toward the world above, and in their wake, the sea stirred with hope once more. The night sky stretched wide as Poseidon rose from the depths, the dolphins at his side. The stars above shimmered, mirrored in the restless sea below. The forgotten waves circled him, glowing faintly like threads of moonlight. They carried with them the echoes of the Chamber of Echoes. Songs of sailors, children, and mothers hummed in their fragile voices. Yet the sea could not hold them fully. The world above must share in their song, or silence would return. Poseidon's eyes turned toward the unseen coast. There lay the answer, though hidden by shadow and distance. The dolphin swam close, sensing his determination. One leapt high, scattering droplets into the night air. The god of the sea listened to the rhythm of the waves. It was stronger than before, but incomplete. He spoke softly. The land has forgotten, and so the sea suffers. The forgotten waves shimmered, as if agreeing with his words. Their glow pulsed in time with his heartbeat. Poseidon held the shell close, feeling its warmth. It carried the first tide, the memory of beginnings. He whispered, "Guide me to the shore, where memory must rise again." The dolphins turned, leading him toward distant sands. The journey was long, but the waves carried them with steady force. As they drew closer, Poseidon felt the pull of the shore. He had not walked among mortals in countless ages. The thought filled him with both wonder and sorrow. Would they recognize the voice of the sea? Would they remember the ancient bond once shared? The tide rose higher, as if preparing the land for his arrival. The forgotten waves swirled around his shoulders, singing faintly. Their chorus grew stronger as they neared the coast. It was not yet whole, but hope stirred within. The dolphins slowed, circling in the shallows. Moonlight fell across the shore, silvering the sand. Poseidon stepped forward, his feet sinking into the earth. The waves lapped around him, carrying fragments of song. He stood still, listening to the rhythm of the shore. It was quiet, too quiet. Once, these sands had echoed with laughter and music. Now they lay hushed, as if asleep. Poseidon lifted the shell high, its glow spilling across the beach. The forgotten waves spun around him, weaving their light. The dolphins clicked softly, as though urging him to act. He pressed the shell against the wet sand. The ground trembled faintly, as if waking from slumber. From the earth came faint echoes of voices. Children's laughter, songs of joy, hymns of gratitude. But they were faint, buried deep in the silence. Poseidon closed his eyes, summoning the strength of the tide. He whispered words older than the mountains. The sea answered, swelling with gentle force. The forgotten waves poured into the shore, seeping like water into stone. The beach glowed faintly, alive with memory. The dolphins sang, their voices carrying into the night. Poseidon felt the bond between land and sea stir again. It was fragile, yet real. The voices of mortals began to awaken, though distant. A single note rang out across the sand, soft but clear. It was the beginning of a song, waiting to grow. Poseidon smiled faintly, his heart heavy with resolve. This was only the first step. The sea could not remember alone. The land must join, or silence would return. He turned his gaze inland, where villages slept beneath the stars. Their voices must rise again, he whispered. The forgotten waves shimmered brighter, as though eager for the journey. The dolphins leapt high, scattering silver arcs against the moon. The bond had been touched, but not yet mended. Poseidon knew what must come next. He would walk among mortals once more, and together they would awaken the forgotten song. The dawn broke gently, casting gold across the quiet shore. Poseidon stood still, his gaze fixed on the sleeping land. The dolphins lingered in the shallows, their fins cutting silver lines. The forgotten waves circled him, their glow softer in daylight. He could feel the weight of silence pressing against the coast. It was not the silence of peace, but of forgetfulness. The people had drifted away from the songs of the sea. Their voices no longer rose with the tide, no longer wove with the waves. Poseidon lifted the shell, its light dim but steady. The voices within waited, eager to be heard again. He whispered, "You will sing once more, but mortals must awaken." The dolphins chirped, urging him onward toward the inland path. The god stepped forward, leaving the sea behind for the first time in ages. The sand clung to his feet, heavy with memory. Every step felt like a bridge between two worlds. He passed dunes covered in morning mist, their silence deep. Birds stirred, their songs faint, almost hesitant. The land itself seemed to wait, holding its breath. Poseidon walked with purpose, the shell glowing faintly in his hand. The forgotten waves drifted beside him, though weaker away from water. They shimmered faintly, carrying fragments of lullabies. As he walked, the air grew warmer, filled with scents of earth. He reached a small village at the edge of the shore. Its houses were quiet, smoke barely rising from their chimneys. Children still slept, their laughter buried in dreams. Elders stirred, but their voices held no songs of the sea. Poseidon stood in the village square, unseen but present. The forgotten waves swirled softly, brushing against doorways. One by one, people stirred, sensing something in the air. A fisherman stepped out, his eyes weary, nets in hand. He paused, listening to the faint hum in the breeze. It was the whisper of the waves, calling gently. Another villager emerged, a child clutching a seashell. She pressed it to her ear, eyes wide in wonder. Her lips moved, shaping a tune almost forgotten. The song slipped out, faint but true, carried on morning air. Poseidon felt the shell warm in his hand. The forgotten waves shimmered brighter, weaving around the child. Her song grew louder, drawing others to listen. The fisherman lowered his nets, eyes softening with memory. He joined her song, his deep voice steady. Others followed, hesitant but compelled by the rhythm. The square filled with voices, fragile but growing stronger. Poseidon closed his eyes, listening as the sea within him stirred. The bond was returning, note by note. The dolphins leapt in the distance, their joy carried by spray. The forgotten waves shimmered, their glow spreading through the village. Walls, streets, and rooftops echoed with the living chorus. The land was remembering, slowly but surely. Poseidon lowered the shell, letting it rest in his palm. He whispered, "Sing, and the sea will answer." The villagers continued, their voices weaving into the morning light. For the first time in ages, the shore felt alive again. The god of the sea stepped back, his task not yet complete. This was only one village, one song. The world was wide, and silence still lingered elsewhere. But hope had been born, small and radiant. Poseidon turned toward the horizon, determination in his eyes. The forgotten waves pulsed with new strength, eager for the journey ahead. The dolphins called from the waves, ready to guide him further. He knew the path would be long, but the music had begun. And once awakened, it could not be silenced again. The sun climbed higher, casting warmth over the village rooftops. Poseidon lingered at the edge of the square, unseen yet present. The villagers' voices rose in unison, weaving fragile threads of memory. Each note carried strength, as though the land itself awakened. The forgotten waves shimmered brighter, their glow spreading across the sands. They pulsed with life, fueled by mortal voices at last. The dolphins whistled from the shore, their joy ringing clear. Poseidon's heart swelled, though his gaze turned toward distant horizons. This was not the end, only the beginning. Other villages, other shores, still slept in silence. The world was vast, and the sea's voice long forgotten. He lifted the shell, its glow stronger than before. The first tide within hummed, singing with renewed vigor. The god whispered, "One song awakens another. This chorus will grow." The villagers sang still, their voices echoing down the coast. Children clapped their hands, following the rhythm of the waves. Fishermen smiled, casting their nets with lighter hearts. The air shifted, filled with music and salt. Poseidon stepped back, his task leading him further. The forgotten waves curled around his shoulders like a cloak, their voices now clear, no longer fragile whispers. He turned toward the dolphins, who leapt in understanding. The sea called, restless and eager to carry him onward. Poseidon walked back into the tide, sand slipping from his feet. The water embraced him, cool and alive with memory. The dolphins swam close, guiding him once again. The forgotten waves swirled, carrying fragments of mortal voices. They blended with the sea's eternal rhythm, forming harmony. Yet the bond was incomplete, needing more hearts to awaken. Poseidon spoke softly. "We must go farther, to the sleeping coasts." The dolphins chirped, their fins cutting through the swell. Together, they surged into deeper waters, leaving the village behind. The horizon stretched wide, endless and calling. For days they traveled, carried by currents of memory. The sea grew vast and wild, yet full of promise. The forgotten waves darted ahead, chasing unseen echoes. They shimmered with every rising tide, urging Poseidon forward. One night, beneath a sky of countless stars, Poseidon heard a call. It was faint, like a whisper woven through the wind. The dolphins paused, listening too, their bodies still. The forgotten waves pulsed, sensing something long buried. Poseidon followed the sound, descending into deeper waters. There, hidden in the abyss, lay a forgotten altar of stone. Its carvings were worn, yet still told a story of worship. Here once, mortals had sung praises to the sea. Now the altar lay silent, buried beneath coral and sand. Poseidon approached, brushing his hand across the ancient stone. The carvings glowed faintly, stirred by his touch. The forgotten waves circled, humming with energy. The dolphins hovered close, their whistles sharp with curiosity. Poseidon pressed the shell against the altar's surface. The first tide surged, spilling light into the deep. From the stone came echoes of forgotten prayers, voices of sailors, farmers, children, and mothers long gone. Their songs rose, mingling with the waves once more. The sea shimmered, alive with ancient memory. The altar brightened, as though reclaiming its lost purpose. The forgotten waves drank deeply, their glow blazing strong. Poseidon closed his eyes, listening to the chorus expand. It was no longer just one village, but voices across time. The dolphins sang with joy, their sound rippling outward. The ocean answered, its tide swelling with harmony. Poseidon withdrew the shell, its glow steady and sure. He whispered, "The world remembers, even in silence." The altar dimmed gently, its duty fulfilled once more. The forgotten waves danced, radiant and free. Poseidon lifted his gaze to the dark horizon. His journey stretched on, but hope flowed with him now. Every voice awakened, added to the growing song. And soon, the world would hear the sea's chorus again. The sea was calm, its surface glistening under the morning sun. Poseidon stood upon the waves, his figure tall against the horizon. The forgotten waves swirled gently, their voices soft and full of peace. He gazed back at the path he had traveled, countless shores and songs. Each voice awakened had become part of the ocean's living memory. The dolphins circled close, their joy echoing in playful whistles. They had guided him through storms and silence, never straying far. Poseidon smiled, his eyes deep with gratitude and quiet resolve. The shell in his hand pulsed with steady light, no longer faint. The first tide had grown stronger, fed by mortal hearts and songs. He lifted it high, and the sea shimmered with radiant harmony. The world seemed to pause, listening as the ocean's voice returned. From distant villages came echoes of laughter, chants, and song. The waves carried those sounds, weaving them into an eternal hymn. No longer forgotten, the sea spoke with both God and mortal voices. Poseidon whispered, "The chorus lives. The silence is broken." The forgotten waves rose higher, curling in arcs of silver light. They no longer drifted aimlessly, but flowed with strength and purpose. The dolphins leapt into the air, their silhouettes gleaming against dawn. The ocean itself seemed to rejoice, alive with memory restored. Poseidon felt the weight of centuries lift from his shoulders. He no longer walked alone, but carried the voices of many. The altar beneath the sea glowed faintly one last time. Its duty fulfilled, it sank into peaceful rest beneath coral. The god closed his eyes, hearing the harmony within his chest. It was not the voice of one, but the song of countless souls. Children's laughter blended with the hum of fishermen's chants. Mothers' lullabies echoed with sailors' shanties across the tide. Every note found its place within the sea's endless rhythm. Poseidon opened his eyes, gazing toward the horizon once more. The journey had not ended, though the silence was undone. Other coasts still slumbered, waiting for voices to awaken. But he no longer feared the task or doubted the path. The forgotten waves curled at his feet, loyal and radiant. They would carry the songs where his hand could not reach. The dolphins whistled again, urging him forward with playful grace. He laughed softly, his voice carried by the wind and foam. It joined the great chorus, one more note in the tide. The sea sparkled, as though smiling in return. For the first time in ages, Poseidon felt whole again, not as a forgotten god, but as a guardian of harmony. He placed the shell against his heart, its glow steady and calm. Then he let it sink into the waves, where it belonged. The ocean accepted it, cradling it deep within its song. Poseidon watched as light spread beneath the surface like fire. Every cresting wave shimmered with memory and melody renewed. The first tide no longer needed to be held by one hand. It was free, woven into the fabric of the living sea. Poseidon turned away, walking across the waves with sure steps. The dolphins followed, leaping, guiding, laughing in bright arcs. The forgotten waves drifted behind, spreading to every horizon. They would reach shores unseen, carrying voices to forgotten places. The silence was broken, and the sea would never be voiceless again. Poseidon looked back once, his smile faint but eternal. He whispered to the wind, "Let them remember always." The horizon widened, and the sea's song grew stronger. His journey continued, but the chorus would endure without end. The ocean sang, radiant, eternal, and forever alive.